O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter.
Welcome to the King's Hand in History podcast. I'm Chris Van Dusen.
And I'm Casey Hoost, and we're here to proclaim the King's glorious deeds.
On this episode, we are discussing the fall of the Roman Empire. Last episode, which was 2 weeks ago, we discussed the reign of Constantine and how he basically Christianized the empire in the early 300s, in the mid 300s. And now, moving forward from there, we are looking at how what once was the most powerful empire in the Western world became basically a disintegrated, multitude of nations and countries with different types of peoples that was mostly consisted of barbarians. And then in the east, we have what became the Byzantine Empire that remained a stronghold of Roman culture and values and wealth. But in the West, we see that this empire that once was powerful, was dominating, was overrun, became just little lands with different lords over it. And then you have the rise of the Pope in the city of Rome. But so following Constantine, let's start off with the seeds of Rome's demise. We actually watched a recent video that Ben Shapiro put out on YouTube for the fall of the Roman Empire, and he notes four factors that played an impact in how it disintegrated. He looked at the economic, the social, the governmental, and I forgot one other one. But he said that the origins of the empire's demise actually began in the 200s, where you have all these Romans, the Roman emperors competing for power, and you have a kind of a mismanagement of their wealth, and you have also the rise of kind of an unsustainable form of government. So Casey, can you talk about in the 200s what were the problems that we've talked about before that the Roman Empire faced, and how did they deal with them at that point in history?
Yeah, so the 200s, the 3rd century, is also often called the crisis of the 3rd century for the Roman Empire. And they had a lot of issues. One of the glaring ones was the instability of the leadership. That I think he said, I knew there was a lot. Ben Shapiro said there were 29 emperors in the 3rd century. I knew in like the 50s there was a 2-year period where there were 7 of them, where basically the power was if you were supported by the military. So anybody with an army that had aspirations of being an emperor, as long as the army was loyal to them, had a chance. But then the problem is they'd become the emperor, and then the next guy would come in. So you get a lot of instability with that. You also have the plagues really start picking up. You have a couple bad ones, so you have less military fighters, less workers.
One of which was under Cyprian, I remember.
Yeah, in North Africa, I think. Or no, I don't know. We'll go, but it
was a big plague.
Yeah, they had a couple that were pretty bad, and then you have they did not understand economic principles very well. The Roman emperors kept debasing the coin, kept putting less and less silver into it, and they'd keep minting more coins. So you get rampant inflation. By the time you get to Diocletian, and he was actually really interesting to study as far as the economy goes, because he was an idea guy. Didn't understand it, but he just kept trying different things. And so one of the things he did is he wrote up a whole list where, you know, like one pig is worth 10 chickens, is worth 4 bricks, you know, because basically you realize like money is worth nothing anymore. So just all these goods are worth, you know, this is how much they're worth, and you can trade them in. But then he also made it so that you had to do what your father did, so that people wouldn't like see it like, hey, like this is favored towards chicken farmers, so if we raise chickens, we'll be good. And so you start to see the seeds in that, a little bit of feudalism. Diocletian
was in 200s, right?
Yep, he was 200, late 200s to the very early 300s, right before Constantine. And so then Constantine kind of comes in. Well, Diocletian stabilized things.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the 200s, the Roman Empire did split a couple times, but they kept managing. I think Aurelian in the 270s kind of managed to bring it all back together. And then Diocletian stabilized things, and Constantine was a very stable ruler. And so they had a period where they had capable rulers, but you also have in this period where, at this point, in order to be the emperor, the empire was geared toward being run by one military man,
right,
which was a problem. Not at the time for Constantine, because he was an able military man, and then for several of the rulers after him were capable enough. Then as you get towards 395, Theodosius dies, and Theodosius was capable. A couple little facts for you. Sorry, was that Theodosius was the one that officially named Christianity as the religion of the empire, and Theodosius was the last emperor to be the sole emperor of the whole empire. But so he dies, and his 2 sons take over, and they are boys. One is 10 and one is 17, and they are not only boys, they're very weak and not good at ruling. And this whole system was based on having a military capable man that could run it all. And then you put these guys in, and it just becomes who's gonna pull their strings.
Right.
And things start to fall apart.
So what were how did things start to fall apart at that point? What was going on at that time?
Yeah, so one of the big things is the invasion of barbarians. So leading in the 370s, I think it was 376, the Goths come to, I'm not sure if it was the Danube or the Rhine, and ask to be let in. And the reason for that was the Huns had moved from Asia over and had attacked the Goths. The Goths had been a stable society where they were happy where they were. The Huns attack, they kill a lot of them, and the Goths realize, we got to get out of here or else die or just become Huns. And so many of them fled to the Roman Empire looking for asylum, looking for a place to live, to work. You know, they said, we'll fight for you. And because of other things going on, they weren't really answered for a couple of years. They were just waiting there until they finally said, all right, we're gonna enter anyway. And they came in, and once they came in, they actually fought a battle at Adrianople where the Romans mustered a force to fight against them, and the Goths won.
Yeah.
But the Goths weren't powerful enough to, like, they kind of marched a little towards Constantinople, looked at it and said, no way we get in there. So they're just kind of wandering around, and eventually different. So, and remember too, there's not really a powerful, or no, at this point, no, the one of the emperors was killed, but so you have different a fluctuation of different leaders trying to deal with them and coming to different terms with them, and saying like, if you fight for me, maybe you can have this area. But not only the Goths though, you also have the Huns are attacking all over because they're nomadic. They're not just like settling in a spot. They're just looking to beat up on people. And so you have the Franks coming over, you have the Vandals coming through, and because of how big the Roman Empire was, like it took a lot of area it was a big area to guard everything. And so when you start having all these pressures coming in, you have losses like at Adrianople when you lose an army to the Goths. Like it's hard to just replace that when you took legions off the Danube to bring them over to fight.
Especially one thing I remember Shapiro was saying is that because of all those plagues, there's actually a decrease in the population, in the able-bodied population. So able-bodied men for the army actually became scarcer and scarcer. And not just because of the depopulation, but also, I think, because there were less people willing to become soldiers.
Yeah. And actually, like, if you look at the Roman Republic before it became an empire with an emperor, that, like, everybody fought.
Right.
And you look at their values then compared to their values at the end, is they had determined that they would never back down, that if they lost a battle, they would raise another army and go, and it didn't matter, and that they would die on the field. Every single one of them would die before that they would ever give in. Right. And that was how they fought.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when you look at that time period and those Romans, their goal was the glory of Rome.
Right.
You see a few times where, because of troubles for the city or troubles for the start of this empire, where they hand over a dictatorship to somebody and say, save us. And the person goes out, fights all the people, or fights the enemies, defeats them, comes back, hands it back, and says, I did this for the glory of Rome, and the glory of Rome is that it's got a Senate. Mm-hmm. And like just such a different view from the end, where it was just these power hungry, it's not even about Rome anymore.
Right.
And you see that as Rome gets sacked, and Rome really just becomes it's just a symbol. It's not actually an important city in the empire. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, as the barbarian. Oh yeah. So as we get into the 5th century, you see with the army that it's actually, the Roman fighting force is mostly barbarian at this point. Right. It's all just deals with the different barbarians to go fight the other barbarians, and they just keep switching sides over and over. And it doesn't look anything like the Roman legions. And these barbarians have all been taught how to fight with Roman techniques. They see how an army fights, because at first, as Rome was going out and conquering, they fought as a unit, mm-hmm. and that's not how most people fought at the time. And so they were able to,
as a unit, you mean like in rows, all marching together with their shields locked.
So they were
kind of like that.
So yes, that they would obey commands and all right. move together. And so you'd see if like barbarians attack them, or some pagan. I guess they were all pagans. But yeah, so some different group attacks them and just comes at them single-handedly. Like right. I know in England that happened, where it was like, I think there were 6,000 Romans, and they fought against an army of 60,000.
Wow.
And they lost 20 Romans.
Wow. And
they killed like 40,000.
That's amazing.
Where just because they were a unit, where
right.
the other people just all attacked single-handedly. But then also you see, and I don't know if we're getting off topic, but when they fought the Greeks, who also fought that way, they manhandled the Greeks because they developed a way to be more flexible, mm-hmm. in that any 10 men could split off.
Yeah.
And if a little unit of 10 saw like, we could take this hill right now, they had permission to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas the Greeks were more just like in rows, like you all follow the commander.
Bigger units.
Whereas the Romans had seen that there is advantage to being able to take initiative.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit in fighting tactics, I guess. But back to the fall of Rome. I think I'd like to talk a bit about the church.
Yeah.
And how, as the political Rome is starting to fall apart, you see the rise of the church specifically.
Now, what time period are we talking about?
In the 400s.
Okay. So after Constantine and all his successors.
And you see the church becoming more and more prominent. Like we mentioned Theodosius. Mm-hmm. He was very interested in the church. I mean, like I said, he made Christianity the official religion, and he very much wanted to follow Christianity. And actually, when he did something that he knew was wrong, and the bishop Ambrose
of Rome.
No, I believe he was of Milan.
Okay.
But tells him like, if you want to be forgiven, you need to do this. And Theodosius, or not Theodosius. No, it was Theodosius. Sorry. And Theodosius does it.
Doctrine of penance.
Yeah, and it shows too that an emperor can bow down to a bishop.
Yeah.
So you kind of get this picture, and then as the Western Rome falls, and there's really nobody left over there, they're like, what's going to happen? The Bishop of Rome really stands up and says, we're still here. And we see this when Attila the Hun in the either 440s or early 450s came down. He was coming towards Rome, and Pope Leo went out and met him, and there's different accounts of why this happened, but he convinced him to turn around and not sack Rome.
Right.
And so you see these people saying like,
did he offer? He offered money though, at least.
I'm not sure if he did,
it, right?
but part of it was
he literally went into the camp.
Yeah.
Right. Went into the Hun camp obviously not alone with a bunch of people.
The people that would want to give less credit to Leo in this would point out that the Huns had overstretched their supply lines, that the back force had just been attacked, like in the Balkan area, and so Attila knew that he needed to leave anyway. And so maybe he got something offered from Leo and was like, that's better than nothing. We got to leave. We got to get out of here to figure out other issues.
Yeah.
But anyway, you still have this image where people are saying the Roman Empire did nothing to protect us.
Right.
But the Pope went into the enemy camp and just saved us.
Yeah.
And so you really get people lifting up the Pope and the go ahead.
Well, I just wanted you to explain, how did the Bishop of Rome come to be known as the Pope?
Yeah, so I'm not sure when the name change actually came, but at this time, this was Leo, who is I think he took over sometime in the 430s through the 450s, or into the 450s, was probably the first one that really became like the primacy, the guy in the West. And part of that was that as the West and East split, the East also had a couple very high-ranking bishops. You have Constantinople, you have Alexandria, you have Antioch. But as you're separated from them, Rome's the only one that had that type of importance in the West.
Yeah.
And then as he's saying, yes, I'm the guy, like you all need to listen to me. And the ones in the East would be like, not really. But as they're not really having a voice over there, everybody else in the West is like, yes. And then they see the popes, Leo sticking up for them as barbarians are coming in, and they're like, Rome isn't helping us.
Yeah.
But the church is still here. The church is still stable.
And Pope, just to be clear, it means father, correct?
Yeah, I think you get the word like Papa from it.
Right.
And then also with the church, you see as the political and the army kind of falls in Western Rome, wealthy Romans who were going into the government no longer really have that as an option. So you get more and more of them going into becoming bishops, going into the church, the clergy, because that's an area where you can be educated, you can make a lot of money. And I think this is obviously not ideal for the church, just in that it's a place where
far from it.
where you get wealthy people coming in because it's a good job. That's not what you want in a church.
Yeah. How? And we've talked about that in earlier episodes, how this came to be where the bishops had more political power, and it became a political office, partly due to Constantine's reign, with building up the institution of the church, for the sake of the stability of the empire. And so bishops became less concerned. It was less a concern about their spiritual purity and their spiritual care of people, but more so it was their they became in many places kind of on par with like a mayor or a governor of that place that they were a part of, because so we see the empire here is now Christianized. If you are a Roman citizen, for the most part, if you want to be a Roman citizen, you are going to be considered a Christian. You are going to be baptized. You're going to be going to church every week, and participating in this formal ritualistic religion that it came to be known. And the bishops became, by this point, by the 400s, they were pretty much universally known as priests, right? I think this is where the priesthood really came to be.
You see them really acting as judges, as cases would come up if somebody's like, I've been wronged in something. They're not taking it to the government anymore. They're taking it to the bishops.
Yeah. So
and if a bishop rules against them, they take it to a higher bishop. And you see cases where literally people will travel to Rome to basically say, like, the bishop I was under ruled this, and I don't think it's right. Can you overrule this?
Yeah. So now it's quite a theocracy. It's basically, a Christianized nation, Christianized empire, except for the barbarians. Some of them were pagans. But what was the relationship between Christianity, the professing body of Christ, and the barbarians? How do they interact with each other?
Well, so that's interesting. With the barbarians are a very mixed bag. You get, because some of them are Christians. The Goths,
so-called Christians.
Yeah, and maybe some of them were. It was an Aryan form of Christianity for the Goths.
Aryan being they thought Jesus was a created being, kind of like the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, and so the Goths are Aryan Christians. The Vandals are Aryan Christians. And so some people argue that they were not as hard and bloodthirsty because of that. You can. It's an argument.
Yeah.
But then you do have some like the Franks, the Huns, the Anglo-Saxons who are going to England are pagan, and so you see the areas that they're taking back over revert to paganism. And you see like this is where this is like St. Patrick's time, though he's going more to past the Roman Empire over to Ireland where the Celts are.
Now you call him St. Patrick, but we know all Christians are saints.
That's right. St. Chris here.
Right. But we're just saying that because that's a popular way to refer to him. But he was just a Christian like any other Christian, like a true Christian.
And so I think at this point we're seeing, looking at Patrick, I think we see it's getting much easier to just say you're a Christian, to go through the rituals. There's this picture of, there's the bishops and this whole church structure that's becoming more and more, I would say, cumbersome to true Christianity. However, there are people like Patrick who genuinely serve the Lord and are looking to help other people to spread the gospel.
Right.
It's getting harder to be like that. I mean, the more you have to, it's on your own. It's being less helped by the church.
Yeah. I would say it's probably a mixed bag with the institution, the so-called, what you might term this institutional church. There were probably many true believers among them, but then probably there's an increasing number of false believers because you simply have to profess faith and be baptized and participate in the weekly rituals of what became known as the Mass.
Yeah, which I would say too, at this point, like you can easily see the seeds of the Catholic Church as it is, but like it's got a long way to go to be recognizable as what we'd see as the Catholic Church now.
Right, and a large part of that was I gotta plug in the laptop.
All right, I'll go ahead.
A large part of that was all these barbarians mixing in with Christian ideas, and so you have a conglomeration of pagan beliefs and practices with Christian beliefs and practices, and I think that's combine those and you come out with the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah, and we can see a lot of that in our culture today, just with our celebration of a lot of the Christian holidays that have a lot of pagan roots in them.
Yeah, right. So into the 400s, let's start winding down the demise of the Roman Empire. So we know that basically the Roman government was at this point incompetent.
They did have some competent leaders, but
for the most part.
But at this point, the problems that it all added up, and because of some incompetency in the early 400s, especially, you have a couple last ditch efforts by fairly competent men, but it's very late, and you'd need a lot of things to go right for it to work.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of political corruption. You get, like I said, there were the two kids of Theodosius that were incompetent, and then you just basically get court intrigue to try to control them.
Yeah.
But yeah, keep going.
Right, so you have all these barbarian tribes, the Goths, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths. You have Franks over in Gaul. You have the Anglo-Saxons. You have I don't know. There are probably others, but those are the main ones. So in 410 you have the sacking of the city of Rome by the Goths, right?
Yep.
But that was kind of a more or less peaceful one, right? Because of the Goths' profession of Arian Christianity.
Yeah. You also get, so Alaric was the leader of the Goths. He kind of approached Rome, and it was kind of like a threat to try to get what he wanted from the Roman government. He's like, I could sack Rome. You should really, deal with me here.
Yeah. And
they just didn't deal with him. So then he didn't really want to, but he was forced to, because like, all right, I got to follow through, because he was like, he's got these people he's leading that he's not, his only claim to their leadership is that they're following him. Mm-hmm. So, he can't really back down from that. And so, yeah, he sacks Rome, but they are Christians, so they don't, like, they leave the churches alone. And yet, basically, the just movable wealth. They don't really kill a lot of people. Mm-hmm. They go in. They take. I think he limited it to 3 days. Whereas when the Vandals sack it in 455, it was a couple weeks, and they did a lot more damage. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so he's kind of backed into sacking Rome, if you will, and kind of shows how unimportant the city is. That he's sitting there. He's like, I'll sack it, and they're like. Not even really responding to him. Mm-hmm. He's like, all right, and then he can just walk in. There's really no resistance to it either.
Right. So that was the first main, invasion of the city.
Yeah. But though the city was unimportant, like as a city, as a symbol though, that was big.
Right.
For like Romans everywhere were in a panic that the eternal city has been sacked for the first time in almost 1,000 years.
Yeah. Can you talk about the response of the two important theologians back then?
Yeah. So you have Jerome and Augustine of Hippo, and Jerome thought that, and a lot of Christians thought, this is the end of the world. Rome is falling.
Now those are two bishops, right? They were bishops, right?
Augustine definitely was.
Yeah.
I think Jerome was. I'm not entirely sure on that.
If he wasn't a bishop, he was at least a very important writer.
So, and he was the one that translated the Latin into the Latin Bible that they used for like 1,000 years after. Yeah. And so Jerome thought that Rome is falling. This is clearly the end. Jesus has got to be coming back any time now because Rome's falling. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a good lesson for us in that it's easy to look around and see how things are not going well, or like America is on the decline. Mm-hmm. And you hear people say like, Jesus has got to be coming back soon. Mm-hmm. Like, well, he might be, but Jerome thought that too when Rome was falling, and that was 1,600 years ago. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Augustine, he writes
The
City of God, where basically he's answering Jerome and also pagans, the elite wealthy Roman pagans who are saying this is because of Christianity that Rome is falling. And he is saying it's not because of Christianity. He basically says civilizations come and go, they rise and fall. It's inevitable that Rome was going to fall at some point. But God's church, God's city, his city is eternal. Mm-hmm. And that's what's more important, the spiritual aspect of it, and that will never fall. And that the things in the state does not represent the church.
Yeah.
And so, I obviously think that was a much healthier view, a much more accurate view. And thinking of like America today, whatever happens with America, like on the spiritual level, it's not that big of an impact.
Right.
It's, we know that God is going to win in the end. We know that we are going to be with him, that in his, so-called city, as Augustine would say, is like, we're going to be part of that, and that's going to be good, and that's never going to fall.
Right. Yeah. So that was the first major sign that the Roman Empire was pretty much at this point winding down in its glory, and its it was pretty much inevitable it was going to end soon. So between that time, between that sacking of Rome and the next one by the Vandals, don't you have at this point basically Rome loses England, right? The area of England.
Yeah. So right around the sack of Rome was when Constantine III pulled the legions out of Rome to go fight some of the barbarians. I think he left his son in charge and basically said, just hold down the fort for a while. And then Constantine, he successfully repelled the barbarians, but then he was kind of a usurper, so the other Romans fought him and he got killed, and just no help ever came back. So the people in Britain, basically Rome pulled out and they never came back. It wasn't like nobody fought them out. It was just, you're just left there. But then in the Anglos and the Saxons were raiding, and were definitely a problem for the people there. And just as go ahead.
Just quick correction, Angles, not Anglos.
Okay, yeah. And so as the people are left there just to fend for themselves after a time when you have no military help coming, no trade goods are coming, no pay for the armies coming, the little the skeleton crews that were left there, after a decade passes, after 2 decades pass, some point you realize we're not Roman anymore. Rome isn't coming, Rome isn't helping. And you also see a very similar thing in northern Gaul happening, where they just kind of pull back and that goes. And then in other areas you have the Goths. Actually, the Romans made a deal with them to fight. If they fought for them, they basically give them this area of land, I think in southwestern France. And then the Vandals, when they come through, they take over Spain for a while. And so you have these large areas of the empire that are just no longer part of the empire. You're not getting taxes from them, you're not getting men from them, you're not getting goods from them. And then the Vandals moved down in the 430s into North Africa. They crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, and this was a real death blow for the western half of the empire. And that North Africa was where they got all their grain from. And so they take over that, and I think 439 they take Carthage, and North Africa's gone. And so there was an effort to take back North Africa, where they gathered an army. When that army lost, I think that was the true, all right, you're not getting it back, because they needed North Africa. Besides, after North Africa was gone, it's basically just Italy and a section of the Balkans.
Right. And can you in this decline with all these barbarians attacking in these outlying areas that were overrun, basically by the barbarians, can you talk about the technological decline? The Romans were very advanced in their technology, in their societies. So how did that change in these places that were basically cut off from the rest of the empire? Yeah,
I mean, it was amazing to read about this, and that how quickly the drop off went from, you have Roman, the roads, they made roads pretty much as good as we make them today.
Well, better,
yeah.
More often better than at least in the U.S.
Yeah.
Than we make them today.
And you have the aqueducts, the public baths. You have trading, you have this monetary system that's very evolved, and you're trading with areas across the empire, and all this stuff is just gone overnight. You have also I was reading something on their agriculture that was pretty advanced too, in their understanding of like using compost and manure and how to get the most you could. Like all these things are just like gone and forgotten like in a generation. And you go from this almost like pre-industrial society that's got all these luxury goods, that has all this wealth, that has a monetary system, and overnight you drop it down and you're back to like Iron Age level, where we've got the swords and the armor that was left to us that was all standardized in the Roman army, made in not quite factories but almost.
Right.
Like we just have whatever you can find, basically a lot of it what's left from Rome. Anything that breaks down, any of the aqueducts, any of the water systems, any of the roads, like we don't know how to fix them. And so you see, and you go back to a barter system in a lot of these places at this point. And you see by the, like in Britain, I think by the 500s when Augustine of Kent goes up there, nobody could read. Nobody knew how to read. And so just the drop off in knowledge and technology and the economy is just just eye opening, amazing.
Yeah. It actually sounds. I mean, we have tons of technology, but like our technology is basically it maintains itself. So like the knowledge that is required for the technology is basically being lost in our society. Yeah. Just like back then.
Well, and I think you see with computers now that they are what holds all the knowledge and the memories of how to do it. They're like, people don't have to know how to do things, they can look it up. Yeah. If the computers go down, like I wouldn't know how to fix a lot of things that I could just look up otherwise, because I've been trained to. I don't need to memorize that.
Right. Yeah. So starting to reach our conclusion here. In 476 we have the Goths in 455.
The Vandals.
Vandals basically make the city of Rome a skeleton of what it used to be. They just pillage it. They kill people. They take its wealth. Yeah, it's basically
they burn down a lot of things.
It's basically destroyed. And then after that, you have the Huns, right?
Right around the same time, actually.
The Huns are just they're going all across the western part of the empire.
Well, they're going over to the east too. Yeah, I mean they were nomadic horse people, so they were traveling fast, and a lot of times they'd go over to the east, and the east was a lot wealthier, and that was another issue that led to the fall of the western half. Is just all the money was in the east, and the west didn't really have any specialized goods to provide. They were trading in a massive deficit to the east, so all the rich people wanted to go to the east. All the really valuable goods were coming out of the east. They kind of viewed the west as a backwater. But so anyway, with the Huns, with like Attila, he'd go over to the east, and they'd kind of go in there, attack a few villages, and ask them, how much money would you give us to leave? And the east would say, quite a bit. They'd pay him a lot of gold, and they'd go over to the west and take stuff for a while, and then come back and ask the east again what they'd give them and get more.
Right.
So,
and in 476, people mark as basically the end of the Roman Empire. What happened in that year?
So that was
briefly.
So by the 470s, it's basically just a whole bunch of little barbarian kingdoms. You do have still this idea of the Roman Empire, though, and you have somebody who is the Roman emperor. So the last one was Romulus Augustus, and he was a little boy that his father, who was a barbarian, had taken power and set him up as the emperor. And then, like, he was in there for a year or two, and then I think Odoacer, another barbarian, came in.
Odoacer.
Sure.
Odoacer.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Something like that.
Yeah. He comes in and deposes the emperor, and basically says, we're not playing the games anymore of saying we're the western half of the Roman Empire. We're all these separate kingdoms. He sends the scepter and the robe back to the eastern half and says, here, and he asked for the Eastern Empire's support, basically saying, I'll be the king here and you guys just kind of back me. And actually, so depending on where you were, like obviously if you were in Britain, Rome fell a long time ago for you. If you were in Italy, like, yeah, it's fallen, but a lot of your lifestyle hasn't changed that much. And the guy, Odoaker, or however you say it, keeps, a lot of the systems are still in place. That work for you, and it's not until the 500s that you really start to see life go more feudal or more medieval, I guess you'd say. But yeah, that 476 was the end of when anybody was recognizing. No, I shouldn't say that. There was a little pocket in France for a while, but as far as Italy, Rome, that was the end of when anybody recognized the Roman Empire.
Right, but you still have the Eastern.
Yeah,
part which became the Byzantine.
Yeah, but they though would call themselves Romans right up until they fell in 1453. Gotcha. If you ask them, they'd say they were Romans, but
interesting.
They are Greek speaking.
Right.
Whereas the western half would have been Latin speaking.
Yeah. So let's conclude by answering this question: what was the Lord doing in disintegrating the Roman Empire? How is he advancing his purposes?
I think it's really interesting to see how Christianity gets to spread, freely. We talked about this earlier, through the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is there. Then once Christianity gets spread, then it's, in God's eyes, I'm speculating obviously, but the Roman Empire isn't necessary anymore.
Right.
That was
of course not.
Yeah. But like it did its job,
right.
Or at least that was one of its jobs. And then, breaking down, you no longer have this massive power structure. And so I guess that's one way I see it working. And then I don't know the individual histories of the different places, which I don't know how much we'll get into them. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But yeah, I thinking of the Roman Empire, I think it's cool to see how God spread Christianity out, and then once it was spread, it moved on.
Right. I think it also goes to show how you cannot. They attempted to unite Christianity to make a Christian civilization, a Christian empire.
Yeah.
And what happened with it? It was destroyed.
Yeah.
Soon after they declared Christianity the religion.
And we kind of got into this last time with Constantine, is even when he did that, he's thinking, we're going to have this great united Christian empire.
Yeah.
And just all these factions came up, and he's like, are you kidding me? We can't agree? Like, we're supposed to be a united Christian people here. Right. And even right from the beginning, they couldn't do that. And yeah, I do think you see the state as a Christian entity doesn't work.
Of course not.
But as Augustine would say too, any state doesn't work for. Really, it's amazing that Rome lasted as long as it did, because you look across empires, like the state in general doesn't work. Right. Really, the only state that works is God's state.
Right.
And that all other human ones will fall. Right.
Absolutely. And so, with the fall of the Roman Empire, you have the early Middle Ages. You have, just to go off what Ben Shapiro said in his video and some of what I've learned, you have monastics, monks rising. You have the rise of the Pope becoming big, Roman Catholic Church on the rise. And then, basically, those religious institutions become the preservers of the scriptures.
Yeah.
And you have all these pagan hordes all around. And I think if you look at the Dark Ages, it's different than what a lot of people say it is. But I'd say, just to bring it to today, relevance to today, we are in a disintegrating society just as the Roman Empire was. And there were faithful Christians back then just as there are now. And it doesn't matter how glorious a country is. If it falls apart, God's people are still going to remain. They're going to be witnesses. And doesn't matter how bad professing Christianity gets, there's still going to be a faithful remnant, and that's what God's people are called to today. So, do you have any final thoughts, Casey?
Yeah, just a general one. And I think this goes for the fall of the Roman Empire, for personal falls, for the fall of churches, anything like that. It's not a fall; it's a slide.
Right.
When it's not like suddenly things went bad.
Yeah.
It's more you can look at a whole bunch of factors, and so even in like our personal lives, as you're trying to uphold righteousness, there's a lot of little decisions that lead up to a fall.
Yeah.
That it's a slide. You're sliding down, and then we see that with Rome, that there are so many factors. I mean, there's more than we discussed. We tried to do quite a few, and they all go together. So in trying to prevent falls of things that you care about, of your personal life, of your families, to be looking for the first seeds of things and root them out quickly, and not just be left wondering at the end, how did that happen so quickly, and be able to look back and see, oh, actually it was a lot of things.
Right. Wow, that's a good application. Be on guard, be vigilant, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, so resist him firm in your faith. All right, with that, I guess we'll end. Thank you for listening to another episode of the King's Hand in History podcast, and hopefully we will talk to you soon. Until then, God bless.